Our journey today takes us to a night that should have been just another, marked by fatigue and routine, but which transformed into a watershed moment in the life of an ordinary man. Imagine the weight of normalcy being shattered by the inexplicable. Think of an instant frozen in time, not by just any camera lens, but by one that captured what many would doubt even exists. We are in 1988, in the heart of the Caribbean. While Puerto Rico pulsed to its usual rhythm, an isolated dark road was setting the stage for a cosmic drama. The protagonist of this story is Amaury Rivera. Until that fateful night, the universe of unidentified flying phenomena was foreign territory to him, a man obstaculos a simple life, whose concerns revolved around financial challenges and the search for a more stable future. He could not have foreseen that destiny had an encounter in store for him that would redefine his existence, leaving a trail of terrifying, fragmented memories and an even more palpable legacy. A handful of photographs. Images that, like visual echoes of an impossible event, would resonate for decades, provoking heated debates, challenging disbelief, and fanning the flames of investigation into the mysteries that surround us. We invite you to dive deep into the enigma of Amaury Rivera, an odyssey where primal fear, palpable suspense, and the unceasing search for answers merge in an extraordinary way. Could it be that some truths are so colossal that, even in the face of proof, the mind refuses to accept them? Amaury Rivera did not embody the seeker of mysteries. His story was that of a Puerto Rican who, after trying his luck in New York and seeing his plans frustrated, returned to his homeland. There, under the shelter of his family, he sought to rebuild his foundations day by day. Life was modest. A cousin, sympathetic to his struggle, got him a job as a waiter. It was early May 1988. To supplement his meager income, Amaury took on side jobs whenever he could, and it was one of these gigs that placed him at the epicenter of events, a photo shoot at a nightclub. He didn't even own a camera. The equipment he carried with him that night was borrowed from relatives, a tool of his trade that, unbeknownst to him, would become the notary of a phenomenon that transcended his comprehension. The event venue was far from his residence. The journey home would require him to cross a rural area, a long road flanked by farms and dense brush. His cousin, experienced in those parts, had spared no instructions or warnings. "Be careful," he had advised. "Animals often cross the road out there. Cows, goats, and fog can roll in suddenly, making everything more dangerous. Drive slowly." Wise counsel, which Amaury certainly intended to follow. However, the danger lurking for him that pre-dawn morning was not listed in any road safety manuals, nor in local ghost stories. The job ended. The weight of exhaustion on his shoulders, Amaury started his car and set off. The dark road stretched before him, a ribbon of asphalt swallowed by the night, and the promise of caution was his only shield. It was then, in the monotony of the journey, that the first sign of strangeness manifested. A sound that broke the logic of that isolated setting. Beside his vehicle, Amaury began to discern what seemed to be the rhythm of galloping. "As if an animal was running alongside me," he would recall. Hooves eterea against the asphalt, a cadence that matched his car's speed, a cow lost in the darkness, a frightened goat. The fog, beginning to thicken in certain stretches, made this hypothesis plausible, even probable. His eyes remained fixed on the road ahead, his cousin's warning still fresh in his mind. But the sound persisted. It wasn't an animal that simply crossed his path to be lost in the vegetation. That thing, whatever it was, escorted him with unsettling persistence. Curiosity, already tinged with a growing apprehension, compelled him to take a quick glance sideways. What his eyes captured in that fleeting instant shattered any notion of normality. It wasn't an animal. It was a form, a humanoid silhouette, small. A weird little man was the description that occurred to him. Could it be a child, a dwarf, running at an astonishing speed in the middle of the night on a completely deserted road? The absurdity of the scene paralyzed him internally. His heart thundered in his chest. Fear, pure, visceral fear. His reaction was pure instinct to floor the accelerator, to flee, to leave behind that vision his mind refused to process. But at the exact moment the engine should have roared louder, it choked and fell silent. A brutal jolt, as if invisible claws had seized the vehicle. The dashboard went dark. The car, now an inert metal box, stopped in the middle of nowhere. Confused, he checked the pedals, the ignition. Nothing. An oppressive silence settled in, broken only by the sound of his own ragged breath. As he raised his gaze again, there it was, the figure. Motionless at the roadside, like a sentinel of the unknown, it seemed to be watching him. The terror escalated to a new level when the metallic click of his car door opening echoed in the silence, by itself. And then, not an audible sound, but a message, clear and imperative, resonated directly in his mind. You will remember nothing. And consciousness vanished. A blackout. Amaury Rivera's universe, for a period he could not measure, simply ceased to exist. When Amaury reopened his eyes, the pale light of dawn was beginning to paint the sky. He was in his car, as if he had merely pulled over for a long nap. But the surroundings were strange, unfamiliar. This was not where terror had overtaken him. And, more disturbingly, there were no memories. The little man, the stalled car, the mental voice, everything had been obliterated from his conscious mind. A torrent of inexplicable emotions overwhelmed him. A convulsive cry which he couldn't contain. An abyssal panic, a sense of anguish that seemed to emerge from the depths of his soul with no apparent cause. His legs trembled violently. It took him several minutes to regain a shred of composure, enough to try to decipher the enigma of his situation. He opened the door, and the fresh morning air touched his face. It was at that instant that a new sound cut through the stillness. Sharp, penetrating, like the whine of a jet turbine. His eyes automatically scanned the sky, and there it was. First, a U.S. Air Force fighter jet, tearing through the blue. Puerto Rico, after all, hosts American bases. Then, a second fighter appeared, executing agile maneuvers. And then, as if materializing from a dream, a vast disc-shaped object entered the scene. Silent, imposing, it moved with a majestic slowness, while the two military aircraft orbited it, in a sort of tense, complex dance, now approaching, now pulling away. No sound emanated from the disc, an absolute contrast to the roar of the jets. There were no signs of aggression, but rather a clear, mutual observation. At that moment, as if a switch had been flipped in his mind, Amaury remembered the camera on the car seat, the camera he had borrowed. An urgency, an unshakable certainty took hold of him. He needed to record this. He needed proof. Who would believe his word without an image to support it? Trembling, he grabbed the camera. He adjusted what he could, aimed, and began to shoot. With each click of the shutter, a peculiar sensation, a subtle, almost inaudible beep echoed in his head, like that of a digital wristwatch. Clicking, trying to capture the disc, the fighters, the entirety of that scene that violated all laws of normality. And it was there, between one shot and another, under the rising sun that bathed the aerial spectacle, that the floodgates of his memory burst open. The memories of the previous night returned in an avalanche. The little man. The car stopping. The voice, But now, a new and vast panorama of recollections unfolded. He saw himself being removed from his vehicle. Upon regaining consciousness, he was no longer on the road, but in a large metallic-looking hall. His car was there, surprisingly intact, and beside it, other vehicles of different models and eras, as if it were an uncanny impound lot for abductees. The sight was overwhelming. He lost consciousness again. When he awoke the second time, he was in another, smaller room, and he was not alone. About 14 other people shared his captivity, faces marked by the same fear and incomprehension that his own displayed. Their clothing told stories of abruptly interrupted lives. Some wore party attire, others pajamas, as if snatched from their sleep. There were even some in workout clothes. They were ordinary citizens, apparently from the region, now bound together by an experience that transcended the imaginable. Then, a figure entered the room. A tall being with dark skin, not in an Afro-descendant sense, but of a deep, unique hue, and long, black, straight hair. He was flanked by two other beings of similar appearance. With disconcerting calmness, he introduced himself. His name, he said, was Amaury. One of the room's walls suddenly transformed into an immense screen. A projector of unknown origin began to cast images. First, a breathtaking journey through the cosmos, galaxies, and nebulae parading at astonishing speed. Then, planet Earth appeared, blue and magnificent. But beauty soon gave way to terror. A colossal meteor on a collision course with the ocean, tsunamis of biblical proportions sweeping across continents, entire cities being swallowed by furious waters. Amaury heard screams of terror around him, but he couldn't identify their sources. The horror was almost palpable. He tried to close his eyes, to look away from that planetary carnage, but his body would not obey. It was then he noticed his feet weren't touching the ground. He was floating, helpless, compelled to witness the apocalypse. It was as if he were present, on Earth, at the epicenter of the destruction. His island, Puerto Rico, convulsed. Deafening thunderclaps rumbled as a thick haze, a mixture of smoke and steam, covered the skies. Some of the people in the room succumbed, fainting. The entire planet seemed in agony. Oceans receded, exposing parched seabeds, while in other parts the land rose, tectonic plates reconfiguring the face of the globe. At the end of the terrifying projection, a new image emerged. A planet that resembled Earth, but transformed. Peaceful. Governed by a single world entity, headquartered on a spectacular artificial island that floated upon the seas. A vision of a new beginning, built upon the ruins of the old. With the cessation of the visions and the full return of his memories, Amaury found himself back at the roadside, camera still in hand, the morning sun the sole witness to his trauma. The drive home was made in a state of shock. How to verbalize the unutterable? How to digest the torrent of images and sensations that had transformed him? For days, he lived in a state of suspension. The nights were populated by vivid nightmares, repetitions of the catastrophes and encounters with the beings. During the day, a feverish agitation consumed him, the certainty that his life had been forever altered. But he had the photographs. That roll of film was his only anchor to sanity, the material proof that he had not succumbed to madness. With his heart pounding, he took the film to be developed. Anxiety gave way to a mixture of euphoria and disappointment. Of the many shots, only 4 photos were salvageable. The rest were veiled, burned, useless. But those 4, in them the disc hovered in the morning sky, the fighters nearby, just as in his memories. Possessing the images, Amaury began to recount his experience. The initial reaction was predominantly one of disbelief and ridicule. Hoax, manipulation, attention-seeking. But Amaury did not crave fame. He yearned for answers. And more crucially, he searched for the others, the 14 souls who, alongside him, witnessed Amaram's projections. He contacted the Puerto Rican media, hoping his story would reach those who had shared his ordeal. Astutely, he withheld specific details from the public account, such as the name Amaram, and certain particulars of the visions, as a test of authenticity. Hundreds of people came forward, claiming to have lived the same experience. However, amidst the crowd, only 7 individuals were able to describe the classified details Amaury had retained. Curiously, some of these witnesses placed the experience on slightly different dates, but the core of the narrative, the most intimate details, converged astonishingly. A web of coincidences? Or was Amaury the conduit for a much broader and more unsettling truth? Meanwhile, the photographs began their own odyssey. Weary of the accusations, Amaury consented to have them submitted to expert scrutiny. Lieutenant Colonel Vendor Listings, a respected figure in ufology, took an interest and forwarded the photos to Jim Dilatoso, a renowned image analysis expert in Phoenix, Arizona, with experience collaborating even with NASA. Dilatoso and his team pored over the negatives and prints, searching for any sign of tampering. The report, issued in 1991, 3 years after the event, was conclusive. No signs of fakery were detected. If the images had been manipulated, the technique employed would have been far ahead of known capabilities in 1988. The analysis further confirmed that the fighters were in motion, while the disc moved at a lower speed. The objects were indeed at a considerable distance from the photographer, at least 3.1 miles, approximately 5 kilometers, which ruled out the miniature hypothesis. The lighting and shadows were consistent throughout the scene. For many, it was the missing stamp of approval. Amaury's story, now strengthened by the expert analysis, began to circulate more intensely, even in the pre-broadband era. And with growing notoriety came an unsettling visit. One day, 2 imposing men, dressed in dark, somber suits, knocked on his door. They identified themselves as CIA agents and demanded he hand over all photographs and negatives related to the case. Amaury, whether by luck or caution, did not keep the material at home. He allowed the men to inspect his residence. Nothing was found. The visitors departed as enigmatically as they had arrived, and, it seems, there were no further approaches. Who were they? What were their true motives? The episode only thickened the mystery surrounding Amaury's experience. In the 1990s, he translated his experience into a book, sharing with the world the details of his foray into the impossible. The Amaury Rivera case persists as one of the most fascinating and well-documented annals of ufology. His photographs, for some too clear to be true, are for others the irrefutable evidence so keenly sought. It is said that sometimes, when proof manifests unequivocally, the human mind, whether out of self-preservation or deeply ingrained skepticism, hesitates to accept it. What truly unfolded that May morning in 1988 on Puerto Rican soil was Amaury Rivera, an ordinary man, inadvertently selected for a revelation of cosmic proportions? Were the visions presented by Amaram a genuine warning, a dark prophecy, or a sophisticated form of psychological manipulation? And the other witnesses, connected by memories so vivid and coherent, what role do they play in this intricate puzzle? This narrative compels us to confront the boundaries of our own reality. What do you, who accompany us, think about Amaury's testimony and the extraordinary images he bequeathed to us? Had you already encountered this cosmic tale and its terrifying implications? Perhaps you possess a unique interpretation of the events, or maybe you know a fragment of this story that we didn't cover today. We would love to read your theories and reflections here in the comments. Your perspective is a valuable piece in our ongoing exploration of the unknown. And if you, like the Alien Cases team, feel a fascination for these enigmas that challenge the fabric of our understanding, know that your like on this video is like a beacon for YouTube. It signals that content like this is valued, allowing us to continue our investigations and reach even more curious minds, eager to unravel the secrets hidden both in distant stars and in the closest shadows. It's a simple, free gesture, but one that propels our mission extraordinarily. Thank you for joining us on another deep dive into the archives of the inexplicable. The truth, as we so often suspect, may reside in a place far beyond the limits of our imagination.